Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 20 of our reading of Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, 26 unforgettable explorations into the realm of the supernatural, and it is adapted by Walter B. Gibson. And we're going to go over the copyright information right now. Put that up. And it clearly says, try to find it. Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone is copyright 1963 by Cayuga Productions Incorporated, and Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Revisited is copyright 1964 by Cayuga Productions Incorporated, all rights reserved. This 1983 edition is published by Bonanza Books, distributed by Outlet Book Company Incorporated, a Random House company, and it gives the address there if you're interested. This book was previously published as two separate works entitled Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone and Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Revisited. Printed and bound in the United States of America. It gives the Library of Congress information there. And that's that. We have been reading from The Avenging Ghost. And they met with Lloyd Proctor's parents, and they suspect he's dead because his mother's having these visions of him drowning or something and seeking vengeance. So, we're going to figure out what's going on here. Okay, I'm trying to find out where I had left off. Okay. Next day, driving northward, Hank Dawson stopped at New Windsor and picked up Duke. As they drove on through Horseshoe Notch, Hank cast a weather eye at clouds beyond Bald Eagle Summit. "I'll drop Cynthia at home," decided Hank, "and take you up to your cottage, Janet. If the storm hits, I'll stay until it's over." Janet was glad to have human company. The darkened cottage was huddled like a lurking creature, while the storage shed was white and ghost-like beneath the swaying trees that resembled hovering monsters. Hank made sure that the shed door was latched, then led the way to the cottage. Soon they had the lights on and the fire burning and the coffee perking. Then Hank said solemnly, "Now all we gotta do is wait for the ghost." "You believe it really is a ghost?" gasped Janet. "An avenging ghost? Probably the ghost of Lloyd Proctor? You have heard of crimes being reenacted," declared Hank. "Well, you saw it happen last night through the reenactment of a dream. But if Lloyd was murdered 4 months ago, how could he have sent checks and notes and the list of antiques? And what about those reports from people who say Lloyd swindled them only recently? Signatures and handwriting can be forged, and it is easy to impersonate a man if you don't try to fool people who know him well. A good guy doesn't turn swindler overnight, but someone could make it look as if he had. Look, Janet, you went out to the shed 3 times before I did. Each time you saw something, but you didn't find anybody. Neither did the two of us. But if somebody had been hiding in that shed, wouldn't Big Duke have found him? I'm sure Duke would have, and now I can tell you why." Janet's mind was flashing back to the night that Duke had found someone in the shed. Janet's own husband, Pete. That alone seemed proof that something unseen and intangible, a ghost to all intents, had figured on the other occasions. So far, Janet had held back any mention of Pete's visit because she knew he hadn't wanted to be known. Now, in the light of things that she had learned, Janet was willing to blurt out the truth, but Hank didn't give her time. "You don't need to tell me why you're so sure," said Hank. "I know after what we heard last night. I'm wondering where this trail will lead, but I know where it will begin. Out there in that shed tonight." The wailing wind echoed Hank's sentiment, and Duke's whimper came in turn. Already Duke was bristling as he had before. His ear was attuned to the high pitch that no human being could hear. The big dog arose and moved slowly toward the door, throating new recognition of the distant sobbing call. Hank came to his feet. "Let's go." They went Tonight, their approach to the shed was steadier, faster than before, and they watched for the latched door to open on its own accord. They were nearly there when it made its first waver, as though extending an invitation from an invisible occupant. Duke gave his mingled yelp and growl as he began a forward lope this time. Hank did not hesitate. Above the furious wind, he shouted, "Let him go!" And as Janet did, Hank added, "Now, come on." As they started, the door swung wide. There, plain in the blackened oblong, was a whitish figure in shape, visibly human, but only for a fleeting moment. Then it was gone. With Duke unleashed and bounding after it, Hank and Janet followed so close in Duke's wake that they were in time to see the inner door swing wide, and again they glimpsed that phantom form. Then Duke was following it to the back corner of the tool room, where he raised his big paws shoulder high and planted them against the bolted door. There, in the full beam of Hank's flashlight, Janet saw the huge hound cornering his prey, as he had the other night, but Duke wasn't barking in fury. He was whining in happiness recognition. The man he had cornered was stroking him, petting the dog's head and forelegs, and now Duke was licking the face that Janet could see so clearly, and she shrieked despite herself, "Lloyd Proctor!" Then, to Janet's amazement, as she watched Lloyd's stroking hand, she could see Duke's big head through it. A moment later, the hand had vanished, and Lloyd's figure, though still vaguely visible, was dissolving too. Last to vanish was Lloyd's face, a kindly, somewhat handsome face that Janet clearly recognized. Despite the deathly pallor, then that vision too had vanished, and Duke was there alone, clawing only the bolted back door and whimpering mournfully as though longing for the touch of a hand that was gone. Hank too had seen enough to be convinced. He stood by while Janet patted Duke, who nestled his head in her arms, as though he had lost one friend and found another. Then Hank tried the back door and found it bolted. Janet spoke in a hushed tone. "I saw him, Hank, as plainly as I see you now. It was Lloyd Proctor, or his ghost." "I saw it too," declared Hank, "and I heard you call his name, but I would have known him anywhere. After seeing his father the other night, Lloyd was a dead ringer for him." Hank paused, then added grimly, "A dead ringer." There was a lull. The wind was dying as though it had done its work. Then Hank spoke emphatically. "Lloyd Proctor was murdered right here, at this very spot. Do you know why I know? I'll show you why." He picked up a handy chisel and pried open the tool closet, in the wall beside the door. "Look here." A moment later, Hank was staring at an empty space, almost as startled as if he had seen Lloyd's ghost again. "Where are the things that were in here?" he demanded. "Who took them?" "I don't know for sure," rejoined Janet in a hollow tone. "But do you want me to guess?" "Yes, it is very important." "Pete was here," said Janet, her voice taking on a cold, impersonal tone. "Pete Riley, my husband. Duke cornered him here in the shed. That's how I know a human being could be trapped there, but not a ghost. Pete was after something because when he left the cottage, it was 10 minutes at least before I heard his car leave. I wondered then what he was after. Now I'm sure it must have been those tools and clothes we found here. I should have told you all this sooner, Hank. And there's something I should have told you, Janet. Remember the day I brought Hillier up here and he sent those two men to the farmhouse to take pictures here? They weren't insurance investigators, Janet. They were state police detectives. While we were in the cottage, they took those things from the tool closet, and instead of going to the farm, they drove back to Hilldale. There they brought duplicate tools and clothes, which they roughed up to match the originals. They brought the duplicates back and put them in that closet. And what did you do with the originals? They sent them to the crime laboratory. I'd sort of figured they might be some kind of evidence, but I was thinking in terms of the fire up at the farmhouse. I suspected arson, not murder. But in the lab, tests showed that what looked like the rust on the hammer was really blood. There were blood stains on the coveralls, too. There was a peculiar sort of clay on both the spade and the shoes, showing that someone had been digging somewhere. So whoever took those duplicate tools and things wanted to cover up, said Janet. Her voice was sad. It must have been Pete, for he told me where to write to Lloyd, and he seemed so sure I would get a reply. Pete must have picked up my letter using Lloyd's name. Then he answered it himself and sent the list. Let's lock up the cottage, suggested Hank. We'll take Duke down to my house in Hilldale, and you can stay there with Cynthia and me until we've solved this case. During the ride to Hilldale, they lined up more facts. Either Lloyd was staying at the cottage, declared Hank, or Pete decoyed him there. Anyway, Lloyd must have found Pete in the workshop out in the shed. Pete hit him with the hammer and took the body somewhere and buried it. Somewhere, Janet whispered, where there is deep black water. When Lloyd was slugged, Hank went on, he must have called for Duke. Maybe it was Pete who shipped Duke to the kennel, so Lloyd could have thought Duke was still around. Anyways, Duke has been hearing that dying call ever since, and always on a windy night, like the night when it happened. It was windy last spring, the night at the farmhouse burned. Pete wanted it to look as if the flames carried to the barn, so he could collect insurance on that too. Hank was silent, thinking, until they pulled up at his home in Hilldale. Then he summarized briefly. In my work, I play hunches. Then find proof. There's two ways to do it. In this case, one is to have those insurance people check Pete's past rather than Lloyd's. The other is to get a good douser working on that water clue, because Pete couldn't have lugged the body very far. In fact, Lloyd may still have been alive at the time. That would fit his mother's dream of drowning. That same night, Hank talked to Hillier by long distance and told him of the new developments. Within the next week, Hillier gained the anticipated results. Calls to the antique dealers established that they had made sales on the specific dates to a man purported to be Lloyd Proctor, but their detailed description fitted Peter Riley instead. The same applied to the more recent real estate swindle. Dupes who had named Lloyd as the proprietor switched promptly to Pete when shown photos of the two men. It was plain that Pete had begun to cheat Lloyd early in the game, running up fake expenses on the farm, then buying antiques in his partner's name, selling them secretly and shipping dummy crates to Pleasant Farm. Apparently, he had murdered Lloyd to prevent him from finding out too much. Then, by posing as the dead man, whose signature he had learned to forge to perfection, Pete had continued to profit while laying a false trail that blackened the name of his unfortunate victim. Meanwhile, Hank Dawson had found a douser in New Windsor. The douser was a man who worked at water witching, as some people styled it. He used a large forked twig, presumably from a willow tree, to find a source of underground water. He gripped the end of the forked twig, one in each upturned fist, so that the stem extended straight outward. Then he started from the ruined farmhouse to cover the extensive acreage of Pleasant Farm, which was heavily covered over with long grass and thick weeds. I never did take much stock in dowsing, Hank told Janet as they followed along. These fellows claim they've got an extra sense that makes the willow stick work for them, but I guess it takes something psychic, as you call it, to see a ghost too. So who are you and I to talk? At times the water witcher um, would pause while the stem end of the forked twig wavered downward, indicating water, but always the symptoms were brief or inadequate until late in the afternoon when they had reached a level spot a quarter mile from the ruined farmhouse and directly in back of Stony Brook Cottage. There, the willow really behaved in an uncanny style. Despite the dowser's efforts to control it, the stem dipped steadily, forcibly downward, pulling the man's brawny hands and muscular forearms with it. Even the skeptics in the gallery of watchers were impressed, for the dowser's face was contorted from the resistance he put up. But whether he was fighting some unseen force or merely struggling with his own subconscious, the divining rod won out. After it pointed straight downward, the dowser relaxed and panted, "Dig there, and dig deep." They dug until dusk settled, and in the course of digging they struck a clayish soil that corresponded to the caked mud on the shoes and spade found in the tool closet of the shed. So Hank ordered searchlights, and in their glare the digging was continued. Finally the ground began to cave in funnel fashion, and loose stones slipped down through, sent back echoing splashes. Hank told the diggers to work more carefully, and soon they uncovered the mouth of a deep well that had probably gone dry many years before and had been forgotten. Whatever the case, it was filled with water now, and Hank remarked that it probably would show on the survey map of the farm. That map had been in the farmhouse when it burned, and Janet could understand why. If Pete had dumped Lloyd's body here and then covered up the opening, he wouldn't have wanted the well to have been located ever. During the summer, grass and weeds had grown over it, leaving no trace whatsoever. But the dowser's willow stick had found it, and more and more. As the searchers probed deep into the blackened water, they came upon the body of what they sought. Janet was too sick at heart to wait while they tried to identify the waterlogged remains of Lloyd Proctor, which they soon did, by a monogrammed ring that they found on one finger. Like the strange cry that had come with the night wind and the oft-repeated dream of a dying face in blackened water, now had become the proven positive token of an avenging ghost. Vengeance soon caught up with Pete Riley. Once he was branded a wanted murderer, law enforcement officers began closing in on him. Unable to tap the bank account of a victim whose signature he could so cleverly forge, Riley was cut off from immediate funds and was forced to resort to petty thefts and stupid robberies to keep ahead of the law. One night he was spotted driving a stolen car. In the chase that followed, Riley took to the side of the road, hoping to shake off a pursuing police car, but it stayed close on his trail. When Riley came to a dead-end sign, he didn't stop. Instead, he crashed the barrier and plunged to his death on the jagged rocks of a deep ravine. Perhaps he mistook the white warning sign for a pale, upturned face floating in a blackened pool. Possibly he thought the wail of the police siren was the eerie call carried by the night wind. Whatever his impression, Peter Riley was most certainly driven to his doom by the avenging ghost of his victim, Lloyd Proctor. And that is the end of the Avenging Ghost. We will start Return from Oblivion. Didn't realize they played Skyrim here. They were a great crew. as Bobby Embry remembered them from the last night that they'd spent together. Like Embry himself, each was an integral part of their ship, King 9, a B-25 medium bomber that belonged to the 12th Air Force USAAF. I think that's pronounced USAF, based in Tunisia. Tomorrow they would be going on a milk run to bomb the southern tip of Italy, as they had done before during this intensive campaign in the year 1943. As Captain Embry was giving his crew a pep talk, along the usual lines that always brought a responsive note. "It's like going fishing, fellows," he declared, "off Long Island, when the mackerel are running, or maybe the bluefish. Boy, would I like to catch up me a school of blues tomorrow. But you've got to be ready for them. You can't lose a lot if your tackle. Oh, you can lose a lot if your tackle is too light." Bill Klein, who wore the chevrons of a technical sergeant, spoke up. "Chief, you make it sound like fishing was real hot stuff." "It is," assured Embry. "The boats go out as we do. All there is ahead of you is sea and sky until you reach your objective." "You mean like target bluefish?" "Like target bluefish. Then over go the lines, just the way we drop bombs from King 9. When your mission is accomplished, you head back. But there's a difference, Chief. Those boats are sure to get back. Not always. Storms can scatter a fishing fleet, and I've been on boats that were lucky to haul into port. But I've always been lucky fishing, so I'll be lucky tomorrow. Someday, I'll be taking all of you out on a boat to some of those fishing spots, like the farms of 17 like the farms or 17 fathoms." Embry's voice trailed. He put his hand on his head. The crew knew that their captain was having one of those recurring fever turns. Klein, hoping to snap him out of it, supplied a quip. "And to think, Chief, I lived all my life in the Bronx, but until you told us, I never even heard anyone fishing off Long Island." "You never even heard of Long Island," put in Jerry Blake. Jerry Blake, okay. The co-pilot. "Okay, Bronx cowboy, you and your buddies scram while I go over flight details with the chief here." And soon, as the rest were gone, Blake proffered some advice. "You better see the medic, Bob, and get some more of those pills that helped before. The boys are all with you. That's why they are so anxious for you to be with them tomorrow." "Right, Jerry," Embry rose unsteadily. "I'll go see the medic, and someday, Jerry, we'll go fishing together, like I said. There's nothing like fishing to make you forget whatever worries you." Not that Robert Embry was the sort to worry. He had shown a cool head when he took his pre-flight training at Amarillo. It's Amarillo. He'd taken multiple engine at Randolph. Then he had gone to England and next to Africa. Now, at the age of 24, he was flying his 38th mission. But when King 9 took off, it would just be another fishing trip for Captain Embry and his crew. It was a hot, still North African morning when the bombers started on their mission. Their progress was registered as an RAF mission, as an RAF operations room, where keen eyes watched carefully, hands pushed different colored markers back and forth across a table that resembled a gigantic chessboard. A jargon of reports was coming in, guiding the moves of the grim game. One British officer answered a jangling phone, spoke briefly, and announced, "Yanks have an aircraft reporting heavy flak damage over Bari. Last heard from over Romadi and headed for the desert. We have a mosquito group flying there. Have them keep their eyes open. What kind of ship? Asked the man at the table. A B-25, Mitchell, reported the officer. Designated as King 9. He watched the board man move the appropriate marker. Then over the phone, he stated, "We'll put out the call in case we hear anything, sir. Of course, if they're headed inland over the desert, the poor devils don't stand much chance." One man who could have gone along with that opinion was Bob Embry, the captain of the King 9, had flown over desert waste before and had often pictured the devastating heat of those endless sands before. Now Embry was experiencing it as an actuality, a heat so fearful that he thought at first it was his fever rising, only to realize that never in his most delirious moments had he been swept by the burning sensation such as this. Face down, Embry felt that the very sand was stifling him. Stifling him. It wasn't soft, it was coarse, and it seemed to grind into his face and hands, even penetrating the cloth of his uniform. Slowly, as in a dream, he rose, feeling the heat of the sand still clinging to his sweaty clothes. As he ran his hand across his face and forehead, he felt more sweat and the slick of oil. He opened his eyes and saw sheer white sand, nothing more, until a stretch of blackness on a nearby dune offered a welcome relief. Okay. We've been reading from Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, 26 unforgettable explorations into the realm of the supernatural, and we have been reading from Return from Oblivion. Let's see. And so if you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe, ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, if you want to support me in any way, or if you want to join the Discord server, all the information will be in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.